Hey, good morning everybody, and happy Friday and happy spring. You know, we've passed the spring equinox, and that's always really hopeful and wonderful. And as you can see, there's no snow, and it's just lovely weather. I'm thrilled that we're making a turn into the more pleasant, weather-pleasant part of the year. So if you don't know who I am, I'm Rita Hickman. I'm a body-mind expert and a Shiatsu massage therapist. And my specialty, hey Maddie, is coaching women who have toxic or narcissistic relationships to evolve, get their life aligned, get some foundational skills in place so that they can really decide whether they want to stay, go, speak up for themselves, transform the relationship, that they're in a place of power so that they can make really good decisions that are in their best interests. So today I'm talking about one of my favorite topics, which is spiritual practices for women, designed by women, and designed for women. You know, I've been doing this spiritual practice thing for a long time. It started out when I was born, of course, raised in a Catholic family. And the thing I love about Catholicism is the mysticism and spirituality that, you know, is deeply rooted into it. I loved when, you know, they'd have the incense burners and frankincense and myrrh you could just smell as it would go through the aisles, and a stained glass and the ritual around it. I just loved it totally. But because of what I was going through as a kid, you know, a lot of the messages and a lot of the principles really didn't resonate with me. So unfortunately, Catholicism on that level didn't stick, because the world that I was living and the life I was experiencing had very little to do with the weekly sermon on Sunday. And because of that, that started me on a journey, not of exploring different religions, because Catholicism, we tend to be a little bit, at least in my family, I grew up with Irish and German parents, and so the Irish, of course, had strong Catholicism, really deeply rooted and mean and kind of angry, and I mean the whole path down that. And the German had the Lutheran side, which is, you know, half a step away from Catholicism. It's just like Catholicism with a little bit less self-righteousness. So anyways, this is kind of what I grew up in. And so I started to look at different spiritual practices very early on, like in regards to Native American spirituality or indigenous spirituality. And I loved exploring those things. And I would do things like I went down to Colombia and I studied with the Arhuacu, who's the indigenous people from the Columbia area living in the mountains. You know, I went into Ojibwe and Oneida and Navajo and Cherokee and Lakota and Dakota and Nakota and, you know, and all of those great indigenous philosophies and beliefs. And whenever I get a chance, I'm always following it. You know, I'm always curious and looking at it. And one of the things that have come out of this spiritual exploration over the last, you know, 4 decades or so has been the recognition that a lot of spiritual practices were designed by men, and they're really for men. They might be marketed to women because we're the ones that are most likely to dive into it and absorb it and use it and embrace it and think it's great. But in reality, it focuses on principles which most women do not need more encouragement to foster. I'll give you a good example. About, let's say, about 16 years ago now that I think about it, about 16, 17 years ago now, I got into Native American spirituality. And one of the reasons that I was drawn to it is because I would go and spend time with all of these wonderful spiritual people. And all you had to do was avoid alcohol and avoid lust and, you know, and the other things like that. And I thought, I can do that. I'm good at that. I don't have problems. You know, I had sex abuse issues, and so no, I can totally avoid lust. I'm completely shut down, so it really doesn't matter. You know, or I can avoid alcohol because I don't like feeling out of control of myself, and so I don't drink. I'm good at this. I'm fine. The problem is I never fit in. And one of the reasons I never fit in, because although I was good at the basic principles of what you need to follow in order to be a good person, what it did is it kept me trapped because then I could just focus on the things that I already didn't have a problem with. And it didn't address the issues that I personally had a problem with, like boundaries. Or, there's a lot of spiritual practices that talk tremendously about compassion. And I'm a big fan of compassion. They talk about being a willow, and they talk about going with the tide, and they talk about all those things, which is great and valuable. But how many women do you know that, hey, Supra, and Kellyanne's here too, how many women do you know that that's not their problem? Being too flexible, being too understanding and compassionate that's their problem. It's not about that they're not enough of the good things that you're supposed to be in order to be a good person. Most women have that stuff in spades. We've got that sorted out. We've been, victimized and ostracized and shaped and taught in these so strong patriarchal spiritual practices that, we got it nailed. One of the neat things about, I'll give an example from Ojibwe beliefs. One of the ideas is that women never needed to do sweat lodges. And the reason they didn't need to do sweat lodges was because they naturally kept getting in touch with their feelings because of their menstrual cycle every month. And so, they'd go through the whole hormonal, the ups and downs and the in-betweens. And so they were designed to tap into their normal feelings and to find some security and safety with it. They didn't need to do these things because they were already physically wired to go through the healing process and the self-reflection and self-exploration process. And so telling women that they need to go deeper just tends to keep you stuck in your insanity, because you keep going deeper and deeper and saying, what can I do? How can I control this? How can I change this? What's my responsibility in this? What's my part to play? Women don't have a problem with taking responsibility for other people's emotions. They don't have a problem with trying to meet higher expectations of beingness, of livingness. The problem is that we've been trying to reach principles and beliefs that are not meant for us. We're not meant to focus more on how we can be more flexible, how we can be more tolerant, how we can be more understanding. When they say the phrase, that women struggle because they're trying too hard to be like men, for a long time I took that really negatively. I looked at it as what do you mean by that? And so with any negative thing, we tend to struggle with it in our subconscious until kind of a solution appears into your mind, and you're like, aha, here's one understanding of it. So when we talk about that, the problem with women is that they're trying too hard to be like men, is because they are. But we've been shaped and led to believe and brainwashed and encouraged to believe that we have the same problems, issues, hormones, brain wiring, challenges that men have. And a lot of spiritual practices are still based on that. They're based on the things that men struggle with much more than they're based on the things that women struggle with. A lot of these, religions and a lot of even more evolved practices. It was one of my biggest challenges when I started getting to personal growth, and almost all the things that I could find were written by men for women. And really, how can you truly understand? You can observe. You can see how women work. You may have a projection. They may tell you. You may try to figure out, what's going on in a woman's brain. But really, you don't know until you live it. Every person is individual. I saw something from Michael J. Fox the other day. And it was that the person living with the condition is the expert. And that's true about this. Women are the experts on what they need to evolve spiritually. Hey, Shannon, we're the experts on what we need to become whole, what we need to, how to reclaim all those parts and pieces of our soul and our heart that we left behind because we tried to fit into this box. Hey, Dina, we tried to fit into this expectation of ourselves, which is unrealistic. It's very unrealistic. even the people that we admire the most, and so one of the turning points for me, for my paradigm shift, hey Tara, one of the shifts for me, my paradigm shift, was when I started to read about things, about some of the great spiritual leaders of the last few decades, let's say of the last 50, 60, 70 years. Martin Luther King, Gandhi, and Mother Teresa, to be specific. So I kept getting these articles and I kept getting this information about these wonderful spiritual leaders. And there was the image that they had, that everybody saw them as rising above, as being amazing, as being, whatever. And then there was the reality of who they were as people. I mean, Gandhi had some really nasty habits. I mean, like, he would have cuddle parties with his grandniece, and he would, when he was imprisoned, like in Africa, he was angry, he was imprisoned with other Africans, and that, they had such low intellect and values. Martin Luther King had a lot of underground issues going on. He threw a lot of people underneath the bus. And Mother Teresa, she was very trapped. Hey, Phyllis, very trapped in a lot of the Catholic and very patriarchal belief, that she felt that her highest calling was to deny people, let's say, pain medication because suffering was good. She worked with the poor, and she worked with the sick, and she wouldn't give them the things that they needed because suffering was good for their soul, because that followed the Catholic belief system. Now, that may be true for men. I don't know. Suffering may really push them, and the aggression and the testosterone, and maybe that's great. But for women, we've really been suffering an awfully long time. And it's time to stop suffering. It's time to stop thinking we need to suffer. It's time to stop thinking that we have to fit into this box, which wasn't designed for us, that wasn't made for us, we weren't considered or consulted when it was created. We were left out of the conversation. We were left behind, so we weren't able to really voice what we needed out of spiritual practices. And then over time, because that was the only thing available, we began to believe that, oh, this is the height of heights. This is what I should reach for. Even things that, about even some practices in Buddhism, and I'm a big Buddhist fan, they talk about how there's a lot of women who they didn't need as many of the practices because they were home in the kitchen and they were evolving themselves. They were enlightened. They had no problems with enlightenment. They didn't have issues with enlightenment because they understood the natural ebb and flow. They understood how to let go, how to deal with trauma, how to navigate and move through things. When these were passed down woman to woman in many indigenous cultures, in the more matriarchal cultures, because there were a lot of matriarchal indigenous cultures, women were able to really support and nurture one another. In fact, I just read today that Rwanda has now broken their own world record of having, I believe, 67% of their Congress, of their political Congress, women. How cool is that? So we have to stop thinking that we need to fit into a spiritual practice that might not be in our best interests. Because when we do, then we just keep pounding our head against the wall in the things that we are already good at and wondering why we still haven't reached acceptance and enlightenment. Have you ever noticed that, let's say you're in a spiritual group and you've been saying the things about, the insights and understandings that you have and the connections that you've made. And it's kind of looked at, oh God, will she shut up already? But then you'll have a male who will speak up and say something, and it's as if, the clouds parted and pennies from heaven started to drop. These practices, these groups are not meant for us. They're meant for people who are struggling with compassion, who really haven't had to be compassionate and flexible and understanding because they've been victimized the majority of their life just because, because of the sex that they're born in. So I want you to think about that for a little bit. I want you to think about your spiritual practice. And so here's your homework assignment today. I want you to question and query the things that you believe you should become, even the things which are sacrosanct, even the things that, are sacred cows. I want you to take 10 minutes maybe and self-reflect on, the spiritual practices. Hey, Michelle, the spiritual practices which are really feeding you, that really move you in the direction of what you need, like groundedness and boundary setting and self-respect and loving yourself enough that you shape and choose the experiences that you want instead of just be buffeted and victimized by everybody else's toxic craziness and trying to fit in. Question them for a little bit and decide for yourself, what do you need? What do you personally need? And take, push aside or at least put on hold some of the beliefs or ideas about who you're supposed to be, just for a little bit, and focus more on the things that will really move you in the right direction. Because going back to my Ojibwe story, when I went up north and, and I had no lust because I was, sexually shut down, and I had no alcoholism problems because I never wanted to be out of control of myself. I did not fit in. And the reason I didn't fit in is because that wasn't what I needed to do. That wasn't what I struggled with. And I needed to find some place that understood and supported and nourished the things that I as a woman struggled with. Tara says it great. She thinks women need women to heal and men need men to heal. And I agree completely. Now, I'm not a huge fan of separation, although I only work with women, right? But there's a reason for that, because I've chosen that I don't want all the dynamics that come between men and women. I made that choice for myself. I didn't want to always have to worry that I was showing too much of my breasts or somebody would take what I was saying out of character, and then I'd have to be on lookout or be on guard to make sure that I wasn't putting myself in a dangerous situation. I didn't want to have to deal with that anymore. So it's not that we need to separate men and women. I don't think that's totally necessary. However, our spiritual practices, our spirituality, our beliefs, the things that we're shooting for, evolving and growing, should not be determined by men. It should not be them outside projecting onto us, you know what you really need to do? This is what you need to do. We need to put that aside, stop trying to fit into this crazy perfectionist box, and have that compassion that we have so much for everybody else out in the world, have it for ourselves too. Because for most women, when we have compassion for ourselves and self-care, it's not narcissism. It's not toxic. What it is understanding that that's what we need to nourish ourselves. And that it's very possible that when men are nourishing themselves, that it's because they're completely cut off from from the needs and wants and ideas of everybody else. Okay? So stop trying to make yourself into something you're not, and love yourself for the way that you are. And if you feel stuck, I do coaching programs, I've got meditations, I've got my live streams, I do all sorts of great stuff. If you're in the area of Chicago, then I also add in body work. So you not only get the coaching to evolve, but you also get the things that you need to nourish and nurture yourself. It's my total favorite thing to do. So if you're in the Chicago area and you like coaching, give me a call, we'll set something up. But if you're not, give me a call too, because I do distance coaching programs and we can move you in the right direction so you evolve in the way you're supposed to evolve, not in a way that keeps you trapped in somebody else's idea of who you're supposed to be, because that's what they struggle with. Okay? So I hope you have a wonderful weekend, and I'm so looking forward to seeing everybody on Monday, because Monday night I've got she's an astrologer, she's into flower essences, she has hey Sherry, she's knowledgeable in codependency. She's awesome. She's one of the most fun people that I know. And so for our narcissistic expert live stream, Monday night, 7:30 p.m. Central Standard Time right here, her and I are going to hang out. She's going to bring flower essence recipes that you can make. She'll show you how to make them. She's going to she'll tell you about astrology and what astrology has to do when you're trying to pick partners. Before you get invested or attached to a relationship, you get to do a little bit of research. You get to find out what problems might evolve from this, might come from this. You know, when you work with an astrologer who knows what they're talking about, you get a lot of secret knowledge that you didn't think that you had. And it prepares you and it helps you make better decisions. So she's going to talk about astrology and romance and how that and how they dovetail and tie in together. And we're going to talk about the normal, natural connection between codependents and narcissists, that whole victim-victimizer thing. Because it's real, it's there. When your habits and thought patterns and way of beingness come up against somebody, you're a match, you're soulmates, because you complement each other's dysfunction perfectly. So when you learn a little bit more about the drama triangle, when you learn a little bit more about what codependency really is, and it's not about you being somebody different, it's about you recognizing who you are and making better choices to shape your life in the way that you really want it to go, instead of feeling stuck in the model that was imprinted on you, probably when you were small, by people who just wanted you to shut up and be nice. So, Tara says, I have a lot of beautiful blue energy around me. Ooh, Archangel Shamuel is around me. Oh, thanks for sharing that, Tara. That's awesome. Those aren't things that I see. Let's see, blue is, my name is Green Chief Woman, Ozawa Shikuze Ogimukwe. And green in Ojibwe is green blue. And green blue is the heart. Green blue is that chakra. So when someone sees blue or green around you, it probably means, like what I'm doing today, talking about something from the heart. I'm super passionate about this topic, as my archangel is telling me by showing up and hanging around me today. So I hope you have beautiful blue light around you as well, as you speak and listen to your heart, and you start looking at what you really need instead of being trapped by what other people tell you that you should need. Okay? Cool. I'll see you Monday.